All right, we're going to get started here. At the end of this measure. Thank you. All right, good morning. Before we call to order, just want to let folks know what we're doing because it's one of those budget time council gymnastics moments. We will be calling to order the St. Paul City Council. We will be holding a required public hearing in district. We will then recess the City Council meeting and reconvene at 3:30. We'll give a few moments for a change of characters up here and let Budget Committee take the table, and really that just means Sherry and Holly will change roles, and I think Trina will maybe disappear, I don't know. And then we will convene our Budget Committee. Today we are hearing from our Parks Department, I believe, that's all. And then we'll get some updates from Ms. Houston. So just so we understand, our folks who are here understand kind of why we're going to be bopping around, and there's some folks new to the table who've never done these types of gymnastics with us. So let us begin by calling the St. Paul City Council to order. Roll call. Prince.
Here. Tolbert.
Here.
Yang.
Here.
Ballinger.
Here.
Jalali.
Here.
Naker.
Here.
Council President Brenmoen.
Here.
7 present, no one absent. Item 1 is a public hearing for ordinance 22-40, amending the appendix to chapter 409 of the Legislative Code pursuant to section 17.07.1 of the Charter and section 409.20 of the Legislative Code to expand the commercial development district at 2078 Ford Parkway to include 2170 and 2128 Ford Parkway and 966 Mississippi River Boulevard South.
Great. Mr. Tolbert, we'll be getting a staff report.
Dan Nazalik is here.
Mr. Najala. Welcome.
Good morning. It does work. Council President, council members, it's a little bit unique, no counter in front of me. So the mic I can start. Anyways, real quick, before you is an ordinance amendment expanding a commercial development district that currently exists at 2078 Ford Parkway. As you may or may not remember from your liquor licensing 1001, the only licenses for liquor that we can issue outside of downtown are for restaurants, hotels, and private nonprofit colleges. So what we have before us is Lund has made application for a liquor license. Based on our assessment of it, it is not a restaurant, hotel, or private nonprofit college application. And so therefore, the only way we could issue that license is through a commercial development district. The Department of Safety and Inspection does not like to create single parcel commercial development districts like we have at 2078 Ford Parkway. We'd like to have districts that represent an area to support orderly development, but also other opportunities beyond just a single person applying. So what we're requesting before you is the expansion of 2070 Ford Parkway all the way out to Cretin with the parcels that have brought Ford Parkway. It is something that we believe makes sense for what the Highland area looks like and how this will feed into it. Once this district is created, and then Lund would be able to move forward on a on-sale, unlimited liquor license for their establishment that's going to be having a grand opening very shortly, and it's going to be a great addition to the Highland area. So with that, I will stand for questions. And the last thing I'll mention that there is a 20-day notification. Given an omission, we were able to make contact with the 5 property owners, and all have given us permission to waive the 20 days and allow the public hearing to occur. That is all I have. Thank you.
Great. Are there any questions for Mr. Najalik? All right. Thank you so much. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Or spell a very complicated spelling word? Is what it looks like. We'll do either. All right. Seeing none, Mr. Tolbert moves to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the ordinance is laid over for final adoption next week.
Thank you. The City Council will be in recess.
Here.
Council President Brenmoen.
Here.
7 present, no one absent.
Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance if you would like. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda items 3 through 11 are before you for your consideration.
Is there anything on consent that we should take separately this afternoon? Seeing none, Mr. Bellinger moves consent. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The consent agenda is adopted. Item 12 is the staff report presentation by the St. Paul Garbage Advisory Committee of their report with recommendations for future programming.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Council President, council members. I'm looking for Sarah, who was going to present for us, but I will start going ahead with the PowerPoint. The St. Paul Garbage Advisory Committee was a group of citizens that were that you all ratified. They worked extraordinarily hard. They had very robust discussions, which were absolutely respectful. Areas of agreement, areas of significant disagreement. You were provided their full report, and in a minute I'll walk through their PowerPoint. I want to emphasize that this is their report. We have committee members here this afternoon. Not all of the committee members, but this is very much their report. Public Works will make a report with recommendations at a later date. But I want you to know that this is their work.
Thank you. And Ms. Young, would you mind introducing yourself and your job title for the public record?
I apologize. My name is Susan Young. I am the manager in Public Works of Resident and Employee Services.
Great. All right, and while we get up your PowerPoint, I will say that we have heard from you along the journey that this St. Paul Garbage Advisory Committee is just a very engaged and active committee, and we're a strange lot, but we're very, very excited to hear the Garbage Advisory Committee's report. So been looking forward to this for quite some time. So,
Council President, for 45 years I've been known as the trash lady.
Simpatico.
It is near and dear to my heart. Okay. And Sarah hasn't come back yet? All right.
I think you'll have to scroll with the mouse.
Okay. This is a report of St. Paul Garbage Advisory Committee. It was a very, very diverse committee. St. Paul residents, we had property owners, we had tenants, we had longtime residents, we had a gentleman who was represented townhouse associations. We had folks from every single ward. It was a very, very diverse group, and they were extraordinarily passionate about their work. Oh, yes. May I please introduce? This is Sarah Axman, and she's committee member, and as I said, this is their report. Not a problem.
Hello, everybody. Sorry that I am late. I thought I gave myself enough time to park, and I did not.
We understand. Been there. If you could, if you wouldn't mind starting, I know exactly who you are, but if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Of course.
And then you're standing in the perfect position for the microphones to grab you. And we were just said before you walked in that we were dreadfully excited to hear this report. So welcome.
Excited about garbage.
Yes.
Yes. So was everybody on the committee, believe it or not. So my name is Sarah Axman. I live in Ward 5, as you know, Amy. But I do live in the part of Ward 5 that's on the east side. So while I very much identify as a Ward 5er, I also identify as an East Sider. And it looks like Susan already started my presentation, so I will just continue as I think Susan was saying. Sure. I just wanted to give some background to the committee. We are a diverse and very committed and passionate group. So some of the major concerns that we had that we really wanted to address as part of this committee that garbage pickup is a public health issue. So that was one of the things Susan first said when we first started the committee. And that was something that we took very seriously, that because it's a public health issue, it's also a public service that benefits everybody when there is good pickup for garbage. We also looked at garbage being an equity issue. Access to garbage pickup seems like something so, I don't know, mundane, but it isn't. It is something that's very important, and that was one of the issues that we addressed when we first started the contract, was that there were people who didn't have garbage pickup, and so trying to look at that equity side of it. One thing that we talked about quite extensively is the lack of options for things like opt-out and cart share. That was something that some of the committee members were very passionate about and really wanted to address. And that's a big reason a lot of people were on the committee, and that's something that we've heard about a lot over the course of the last few years with the contract. We also talked a lot about environmental impact, waste reduction, how can we encourage waste reduction through this contract? Can we at all? What are the environmental impacts of trash pickup itself, of things like the garbage trucks and how often they're driving down our streets? So those were all things that we talked about as well. And of course, the local economic impact. That was something that we saw with a lot of the smaller haulers that were part of the consortium originally, that were bought out over the course of the terms of the contract, and what are other things that could impact the economy. So those are some of the things that we looked at and talked about as we made our recommendations. So I kind of broke this into sort of two sections. I wanted to start with some of the areas where we had a lot of agreement. That doesn't mean we had 100% agreement. There are majority and minority concerns with almost every part of the report. So of course, full details are in the report. But there were some things that we generally had some agreements around and some things that we had a lot of disagreement around. So I wanted to start with the issues we sort of agreed with more or less. One was how we recommend approaching an RFP and the contract mechanics for the next cycle of contract negotiations. Billing and customer service, which are kind of linked, as we'll see, and yard waste and organics were all things that we thought were, we had some more agreement on. Issues that we had less agreement on, opt-out and cart sharing. We do have separate sections of the report for opt-out and cart sharing, but there is a lot of overlap between those two. Service holds, in general, costs and pricing. We had lots of different ideas on how to approach the costs and the pricing. And there was some disagreement about bulky items and how bulky items should be approached as well. So I'm going to start with the things that we had more agreement with. So a big one is just approaching an RFP. And a big recommendation is we do think there should be a new RFP. We talked a lot about the difference between an RFP and just a bid. And we do want to see the RFP because there's a lot of service recommendations and things like that that we want to see as part of the RFP. So that was something that came up. I think a lot of us agreed that we were not necessarily happy with how the consortium had been able to serve as part of this contract. So looking at, are there other options that we can consider? And one thing that we also discussed was a municipal option. Obviously, there would be a lot of cost involved with that, so that is something that it's really easy for us to say, yay, municipal, and something that you guys would have to figure out paying for. But we thought from looking at a local economic impact, for example, having trucks owned by the city, having the garbage haulers be city employees, having all aspects of it owned by the city would be beneficial in terms of level of service, long-term economic impact. So that was something that we would like to be considered. In terms of billing, billing and customer service, I basically have the same note, which is that we would like billing to be done by the city and not by the haulers. So we would like the city employees to take over the work of sending out bills and handling any kind of billing dispute or anything like that, and not have that go through the haulers. Similarly, with customer service, we would love to see customer service come into St. Paul. We heard lots of complaints, both from committee members as well as the general public, who gave us a lot of comments, that there are a lot of issues with, like, we would call customer service that's handled by the haulers, and they would tell our citizens things that were not true because they were maybe true for other municipalities. So there was a lot of issues with customer service in general, and a lot of issues with the customer service being incorrect for what our rules were in St. Paul. So we would like to see both billing and customer service be handled by the city by city employees and not by the haulers. So whatever happens with the consortium or any other third-party hauler, that's one thing we would like to see. Yard waste and organics, kind of a weird thing, but we did have a lot of discussion about it. One thing that most of us agreed on was seeing yard waste as a separate paid service. So picking up yard waste as an additional cost and an additional service that's not part of the service for everybody, because you can build it into, everybody. That's part of their monthly payment or quarterly payment or whatever it might be, that they can always have yard waste, or you can have it sort of as an additional thing. Most of us felt like we could keep it as a paid separate service, although there are some disagreements about that. There was also a lot of discussion around, it could be something where, like, you can have yard waste for all of spring and fall, or you can kind of have, hey, this week I have a bunch of yard waste, can you pick it up just this week? Kind of an a la carte option. Okay. Are there any questions so far?
I wasn't sure if we should be holding on to them or, because you're just on such a roll. I mean, so far it sounds great, and it sounds like it's in alignment with a lot of the things that we've been hearing and talking about. So
That's good. Well, now we're getting into opt-out, so hold on to your chairs.
I will say, just underscoring that I love the notion of just moving billing and customer service to the city. I felt that it was very frustrating when people contacted us and then we had to send them back to the hauler that they were already frustrated with, or that our city staff, thank you, would contact the hauler for us, and just kind of cutting out the middle person in that regard. Just seems like it's just more transparent and easier for people to deal with.
Yep, that was similar conversations to what we have for sure.
Great. Well, let's talk about opt-out.
Okay, let's do it. So opt-out. This was not surprisingly probably both opt-out and cart share. A lot of similar issues could be handled either by opt-out or cart share. So in terms of specific concerns that committee members or community members had, a lot of it kind of falls into this bucket. So I'll start specifically with opt-out. So this would be residents having the option to just not be part of the garbage program at all. They don't pay into it. They don't get that service. They are just completely removed from it. There were a lot of people on our committee that wanted that. That was one of the goals they had of being on the committee. There has, of course, been a lot of discussion about that since the contract started. They felt that, if you don't produce waste, why should you be part of it? They felt like,
Yeah, sir, are you filming right now? Okay, it seems like there's a lot of fussing around and you're dropping stuff, and Ms. Axman is trying to testify, so if you're just kind of on hold, it'd be nice if, we could respect the testimony. Thank you so much, sir. Yes.
So there are a lot of concerns around people who don't produce a lot of waste or have before the before the contract came into play, they, took care of their own waste by taking it directly to a dump or whatever. So that was an area of big concern, and there are a lot of people on the committee who very much would like to see an opt-out option of some sort. There are people on the committee and in the community who feel just the opposite, that the garbage service does benefit everybody. It is a public health issue, just like any municipal service. There are people who pay into it that don't directly use it, but there is benefit to the community. So everyone should contribute, even if you don't personally use the service. It is something that you benefit from having the service exist. There are a lot of sort of middle options, if you will, where there are some pricing structures that we outline in the billing and pricing section, for example, where there could be some kind of fee that you pay to opt out. So there's still sort of a contribution, if you will, even if you do not directly receive a cart. So I'm going to move on to cart sharing so that I can talk about some of the other specific issues that came up that opt-out was one of the options to address. So with cart share, so this would be beneficial for multifamily houses, for example, where currently each unit has its own cart, and there are people who don't want that because that means that they have way more carts than they need. They're paying a lot more money for less or not as good service, they feel. There's also people who feel like, I produce very little waste, so what I'm paying now, if I could share with my neighbor, that would be beneficial. One issue I wanted to mention, we did have one person on the committee who represented an HOA, and that had caused some problems because some of the properties within the HOA qualified for this program and some didn't, and they were not able to they used to just have a dumpster for everybody and they couldn't do that anymore. So there are some kind of specific issues like that that cart sharing could potentially assist with. As it says here, more flexibility for low waste producers. And a lot of what came up with that was the multifamily homes. We had one person on the committee who owned a triplex, so she lived in it, and then she had 2 renter units. She used to just have 1 garbage, and that was enough for the entire property. Now she has 3 carts. It costs much, much, much more. She got the cheapest option, which does not give her enough space to take care of all their garbage, so she's paying a lot more for a lot less output, essentially. She was one that was advocating for an opt-out option, so I can get the larger one for me and then opt out my residents or whatever, or a cart share where, I can cart share with my entire property, and basically get back to what she had previously. She, was using the garbage service. It just wasn't working for her under the new system. The cons for cart sharing are mostly
Before you move on, can I just?
Yes, of course.
I'm curious, and perhaps you're going to get to this, but one of the issues I think a lot of us had been concerned about in the beginning was the condos or the HOAs, and
yes,
just there's a pretty good case that they should be all opted out. I mean, it really is, even if they're separate clusters of 4-unit buildings, it is one. Did you make a recommendation on that particular piece, or?
Yeah, I believe we do have a recommendation on HOAs. I don't know if I have that one specifically set aside, but my recollection is that we did recommend that HOAs can have some kind of carve out, because one of our concerns with potentially cart sharing is opting out and not giving sufficient other coverage, if you will. But I think we felt like the HOA management would be sufficient to make sure that there was still sufficient service for those residents.
And I'm realizing that I'm doing the thing where I use an acronym, and maybe half the people in here don't know, but HOA is a homeowners association, and it's also sometimes called a condo association, but it's basically where the grouping of properties are managed by the bylaws of that particular homeowners association.
Yep. And if I remember correctly, it's actually called something else in St. Paul. We had a whole discussion about that too. There's some other name for it in the bylaws. But yes, I think HOA is kind of the more common term maybe. So yes, that's what we're discussing.
Okay.
All right, so in terms of the cons for cart sharing, that is mostly around enforcement and logistics. You know, I want to cart share with my neighbor, and then my neighbor moves away. So what does that mean to the rest of my contract? Concerns about like, could there potentially be landlords who are not residents of St. Paul, for example, that are using this to provide the minimum amount of garbage service that's not sufficient for their residents? Could there be potential issues with, you know, we said that we are doing cart share, and we're not getting, we're leaving garbage unpicked up. So we're trying to get around paying for something and then not actually taking care of our garbage. So some of the cart sharing cons were around that. We want to make sure that if there are opt-out or cart share exceptions made, that there are other things in place to make sure that garbage is still being picked up, there isn't a public health issue, and that it's just fair and equitable to everybody. Okay, so those were the most contentious parts of our meeting. I'm sure that's not a surprise. Service holds, so this would be when people are, you know, going to be, you know, like snowbirds who go to, you know, Florida for the winter or whatever, so they don't get garbage service for long periods of time when they're not in residence. There was some discussion about, first of all, not requiring a reason. Like, you don't have to like prove anything to get a service hold. We do think that there should be a written plan outlining the program to just be very clear about who is eligible for a service hold, how it works, and just more clarity and transparency around that. Some disagreements, there were people on the committee who advocated for making it easier to get a service hold, and that could potentially be a way to, that you could use a service hold like an opt-out if you are a low waste producer. So that was a little bit contentious because there were people that were advocating for that. And there were other people that felt like, you know, if you as the council decide not to allow opt-outs or cart sharing, why would we allow service holds as like a loophole? So there was some discussion around that. But, you know, that is one thing you could potentially do, is use service hold as like an alternative option for an opt-out or a cart share, especially for, we had some low wasters on the committee that wanted to have something in place for not producing garbage and not needing the garbage cart share service.
Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. So just so I understand, would that be sort of an indefinite service hold for as a way of opting out or cart sharing?
Potentially, yes.
And why would that be an advantage over opt-out or cart share?
I think that the hope was that if opt-out or cart share were not on the table, that putting less restrictions on service holds would allow them to essentially have an opt-out option without having an opt-out option.
If we just don't like the words opt-out, we could do. I'm just trying to understand. I mean, I see what you're saying. It could be one system and you can use it for when you're gone or all the time. But
Yes.
It's basically the same.
Yes. And, you know, I mean, currently the point of a service hold is like when there is nobody living in the residency. So that would have to sort of change the definition of service hold a little bit, you know, because currently part of service holds is there does have to be checks to see, is someone living there? Because if someone's living there, the service hold is not valid anymore. So that would have to be not how a service hold works anymore if we were to do it this way. It would allow people to have a service hold when they were in residency of the dwelling.
Thank you.
All right, costs and pricing. So there are lots and lots of options for costs and pricing, and so we have a whole buffet of options for you laid out in the report. One option would be some kind of base unit cost per property, and then an additional fee per cart, because currently we just charge per cart, but it would allow us to have, when you have like multi-unit dwellings, you would have one base fee for that, and then any carts you get are additional. You could also do base unit per dwelling, so then you would have, instead of one base cost for a multi-unit dwelling, you would have, 3 or 4 or 2, whatever, however many options there were, plus the cart fees. There were people on the committee that argued specifically for pricing based on volume. It is a recommendation on the report, so I wanted to make sure to mention it, but I will also mention that that may not be a very practical option, because that's just simply not how garbage pricing works. There are a lot of built-in costs for every garbage that gets picked up. There are certain fees associated with that, and then the volume is on top of that. But there was discussion about the fact that, we have 3 cart sizes, 4 if you include the biweekly on the smallest cart size, and so it's a much higher cost per volume for those units. But if you look at the breakdown of how the pricing works, there's a lot of just base costs in terms of like the tipping fees and the taxes and all of that have to be paid for every cart that gets picked up regardless of the size of the cart itself. But that was one of the committee opinions, so I wanted to share it. There was also discussion of sort of the counterpoint to we do have fees if your garbage is over full and the lid won't close. There were people who advocated for getting some kind of reduced fee if the cart is not full. So if you have one size cart and it isn't full all the way, you should get back some of that like volume price. So not sure how we would be able to, like logistically, that's maybe a complicated thing to actually implement, but that was one of the thoughts that we had. The pricing section is quite extensive and has a lot of details about the breakdowns of the different fees and everything like that, but that's kind of high level some of our thoughts. And we don't have one specific recommendation for that because there was a lot of disagreement. Next, we have bulky items. Basically what this comes down to, so again, just in case you're not, you didn't just spend several months talking about garbage every 2 weeks, a bulky item would be larger things like mattresses, couches, anything that doesn't really fit in your cart that maybe need to be removed. Currently, we have every resident is able to have some bulky items removed as part of their yearly costs, essentially. And there are a lot of different ways that you can do that. We looked at a lot of other cities around the metro and how they handle bulky items. So there are a lot of different kind of strategies around that. But a lot of our options were just around how to include that. Is it an add-on, so if you specifically need it, you pay an extra $5 or $10 or whatever it is? Or is that something that is just built into our overall costs that we can, anyone can just call and get their bulkies taken care of? How many bulkies do you get a year? Is it whenever you need it, or are there are other cities that have bulky week, where that's just something that they do? Is that something that is handled by the hauler? Is it something that's handled by the city? What do we do about illegal dumping, which isn't necessarily bulky items, but it often is. And obviously that's one of the things that came up a lot was how does this play into dealing with bulky items when there is illegal dumping? So again, I don't have sort of one specific recommendation from the committee on that because there were a lot of different opinions and didn't really come to one consensus on that. So, and I think that is everything I had. Of course, there is far more in the report. That was maybe just scratching the surface of some of the details. We do also have a lot of recommendations, majority and minority, but we also have just a lot of comments, both from the committee, and there's an appendix in here that has comments from the public as well.
Really do appreciate, I mean, just having the group go through that and recognizing the complexity. It's easy. A lot of people have one issue in particular, like I'm a zero waster and I want this.
Yep.
Or I'm a landlord and I want this. And when you kind of try to put it all together as a municipal service, it is, you really do recognize. I think that's one of the things we face here at the table all the time. Is nothing's one-dimensional. There's just a lot going on, and it sounds like it was a very thoughtful discussion.
Yeah.
I'm particularly intrigued by the conversation around base rates. Ms. Yang, Mr. Tolbert, and I serve on the water utility, and we've really made a kind of a conversion towards a base rate because that infrastructure needs to exist to provide service across the city, whether you're using a lot or a little.
Yep.
But had a lot of conversations about, what are we doing about incentivizing less use? And I think that overall use is down. And to just try to be equitable, and maybe even when you start thinking about opting out but charging a base rate, there's I see some answers kind of emerging from the deep dive that you did here. So I really do appreciate that. I think I've seen some of my colleagues' hands go up. I know Ms. Prince did and Ms. Yang. So why don't we go to some questions?
Absolutely.
Ms. Axman, the report is great, and it is so dense, and there's so much good information here, and I really want us all to read it, because there is such good information, and it really, you have with the minority and majority findings in each area. And then the public comment at the end. You've given us a lot to chew on as we're figuring out the next steps. One thing on the bulky issue that I did notice, and I think it's really good information for us to have, that I recall in 2017 when we passed the contract, that one of the things we were very excited about was the bulky pickup, because we had such a significant amount of illegal dumping that was happening in our city. And it's really important for us to see in this report that illegal dumping did not go down over the period of time, that illegal dumping went up considerably. I think the number in 2017 was about it was somewhere under $400,000 of illegal, dollars spent on picking up illegally dumped trash. And last year, it was over 700,000. So I think this is something that, gives us a lot to dig into in terms of our bulky policy, and whether charging people for the bulkies, what the usage was. You've got that all in here. It's really good information. So I don't need you to comment on that. I think it's great to see that level of detail in the report that you produced, and I appreciate that.
I like the idea of bulky week. I think people just still, no matter how many times I talk about it here, Mr. Tolbert's teased me about that. People just don't know. And they show up for the spring cleanups with their mattresses, and you're like, you can get that picked up in your alley. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
So maybe something where it's like, this is the 3 times a year where we do it would be easier. But I really did some really good thinking about that. Ms. Yang.
Thank you. Well, I want to say thank you, and thanks to the rest of the committee members for your work in putting together the report, and thanks to the staff as well. Overall, all of the things that you talked about, it really is in line with the different issues, concerns, and things that people do like about our current trash system. And I was wondering, for bulky item services, do you know, or maybe this is a question for Susan too, how many people in St. Paul actually utilize that? I'm really curious about that. And also I was wondering if you can talk about, now that the report is out, what's next in the timeline too?
I don't know. I don't have that stat on the top of my head. Do you know it, Susan?
Council President, Madam, I want I wanted the committee's report to be given to you. They worked their tails off. I'm sorry, I respect that so much. And we've got some folks, other committee members here. I wanted you to be able to have that. I expect that within the next 2 cycles, Public Works will have our recommendations for you because it will be part of our planning for next year and part of the budget process. In terms of bulkies, I got these years. In any given year, 10 to 13% of your residents will have bulkies to put out. You don't refresh the living room every year. You don't redo the kitchen every year. But when you do, it's a bunch of stuff. The other challenge that St. Paul has and other large cities in the metro have is that people commute into here for work, or they commute into here to see grandma. And on their way in, at the first exits off of the interstates, that is where we see a large amount of illegally dumped material. That is not something that in St. Paul, with our garbage program, we can fix, but it is something that just about every city that has people commuting into the city, every city has that problem. In my perfect world, I would have significant cameras with high resolution to get their license plates. And in some other places where I've done some consulting, dumpers are stupid, and they usually leave something. It costs to prosecute, but when you know that there is that available, it does help. Illegal dumping is a huge problem. Just a bulky program won't fix it, but I believe pretty strongly that some sort of city-provided bulky program is important. So I think I tried to hit both questions.
And just to my colleagues, I think something you said is really important here is that you'll be back to us with your recommendations for garbage hauling. We're hearing a report from the committee right now, so let's keep our focus on that and then hold maybe questions about like what are we going to do going forward for when the Public Works comes back, if that's all right.
One other just quick comment about bulkies is one thing that we did discuss was that, and someone kind of mentioned this, I think that people don't know about the program. You mentioned that, Amy. People don't always know about the program or know what's available. We also saw, getting back to the customer service program, we did have issues with, we would call to, there were residents who called their hauler to request a bulky and they were told incorrect information about what was available. So I think there's just not clarity for a lot of residents about what their options are. So whatever the bulky program ends up being, just the ability to communicate that is something that we would like to see.
Definitely. Other comments? Ms. Prince?
I think another thing that I am getting from this is that if we are now going ahead to do an RFP, which I'm assuming is the next step, that this report by the Garbage Advisory Committee really gives us the message from the whole community that was represented on this group, that our priorities should be serving residents, keeping our environment clean, and working toward waste reduction, along with just plain common sense. That when we do this RFP, we have heard from you and through your hard work. It was every 2 weeks for how many months?
Yeah, I think we started in February and we finished up in May, or was it early June?
Late June.
Late June. Yeah.
It's amazing because you have really given us the values that should inform the RFP. And I thank you all for that.
It's perfect timing too, because I think when we were originally shifting, we had 17 haulers and we were trying to preserve haulers, and we have preserved some and some have sold, and the ground has shifted quite a bit, and I think we're in a position to really look at things differently, and so this is really perfect timing. I've heard this from my colleagues, so much gratitude. I was wondering if you're part of the Garbage Advisory Committee, if you could just stand up. I know that it shook a crew. Thank you. Thank you. We truly do appreciate your work and your advice on this. We look forward to digging in, and I think I'll just say I'm looking forward to having a very rational conversation about how we move forward with garbage, because the last time was a lot, and this time it feels like we're grounded and we're ready to take this on in a manner that will really serve our community and make good common sense. So I appreciate where you're leaving us here today, and that we're looking forward to our next steps from Ms. Young. We appreciate your leadership on this as well, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, council members.
Item 13 is ordinance 22-37, amending Chapter 193A of the Legislative Code pertaining to rent stabilization.
Okay, on this item, I wanted to circle back on two amendments that were discussed last week, and that, as well as an amendment that Mr. Tolbert and I would like to introduce this week. I guess I will start out by repeating what I mentioned last week, and that is that I brought forward an amendment that was to attach a prevailing wage requirement to any new construction agreement, and that was to ensure that folks working on construction projects for new housing would be paying their workers a fair wage. That is a value of our city, it's a value of this council, and we intend to move forward with that. In working with our city attorney's office and with partners in the labor unions, we are not ready to go forward with that. We are still working on some language and trying to figure out the right place in the code to put it. So I am not advancing that at this time, but it is my intention, and I think the support is fully here at the council and in the administration as well, to advance this sometime in the next month or so, given that it will have to have its 3 readings. But the intention is there to advance this when we are ready to move forward with the proper language and with sign off. So that is, it is actually not, it's an attachment, so I'm just acknowledging that it's there and it will be moving forward, but it will be moving forward separately. I look to Ms. Jalali on the affordable housing exemption.
Thank you. So I moved an amendment last week that did not pass about re-including affordable housing of all types, basically not creating any kind of exemption for affordable housing. I remain extremely concerned about what I think is overly broad language in the ordinance we have now that exempts many different types of affordable housing and renters from the policy. The amendment I am working on, which is not completed yet, and it is in an imperfect form called Strike Affordable Housing Exemption, version 2, compromise, also needs more time. This is also something I've heard interest from other council members that they would be willing to look at different ways we can create distinctions between the different types of affordable housing providers and what would be the best way to do that. The challenge comes in making sure that we can follow the law, understand the different regulations each is subject to, understand the operational differences and other factors. So similarly, I am not able to advance this today due to needing more time on the details, but I think it is a very important policy goal, and I think that what we are advancing creates issues that we're going to need to address. So I am similarly not able to move forward with that amendment today. I do appreciate, since it's publicly posted, we've gotten some feedback. I want to reiterate it's tremendously first draft, and I think more feedback will make it better to serve the goal of protecting low-income renters in the rent stabilization policy, which I think should be our objective as a city.
Thank you, and I think it's important to call out those intentions here so that people can hold us accountable, and we'll continue to move forward with both of those items. Third thing I mentioned was that Mr. Tolbert and I are introducing an amendment today, kind of following conversations that came out of our votes last week, and that is we added the vacancy decontrol as a mechanism to incentivize and I still do believe this, that would incentivize reinvestment in our properties. I'm deeply concerned about disincentivizing that, and that it would create a defensible just cause end of lease requirement, which we do not have currently, and I think that's important. I think it's the easiest to understand and track easiest to educate people on and communicate, and I know that there was disagreement here, but what we heard loud and clear was that folks were concerned that we were giving a blank check with an untethered vacancy decontrol. And so the amendment before us today is to address that by adding a limit when there is an increase, a just cause end of tenancy, that caps any increase to 8% plus CPI. And so that is in an attachment that was added later this afternoon. I'm sorry about that. Again, that's when we were able to get it inputted. It's a very small adjustment and basically just says exactly what I said. It puts a cap on a vacancy decontrol to 8% plus CPI. So that is before us for consideration. If we vote on this and it passes today, we will have public comment next week, but we still will be able to pass it because it would be in its final form from this week to next. Is there any discussion on this motion? Ms. Prince, then Ms. Yang.
Yeah, Council President Brenmon, I want to thank you and Councilmember Tolbert for bringing forward this compromise provision to the amendment that I made last week on vacancy decontrol, and I will be supporting it. I do want to say I'm concerned that there is a fundamental misunderstanding in what vacancy decontrol is about. It is not an incentive for eviction, and in fact, it's exactly the opposite. I've been talking to tenants and landlords for the last year about these issues, and in fact, vacancy decontrol allows landlords to preserve long tenancies without having to raise the rent every year, knowing that at the end of the rental period, they can reinvest in the unit and maintain their market rate. I received numerous emails to that effect, but just to give an idea, our policy has always been, this is one small landlord, our policy has always been to keep rents the same for long-term tenants without the need to raise rents 3% every year to keep up and to be able to stay at fair market value. So I think that we're losing those opportunities here. I think that the cap will definitely help with the ability for the landlord to make those reinvestments. And so I am going to support the amendment.
All right, thank you. Ms. Yang.
Thanks. I'd really like to give a shout out to many of the community leaders and organizations who did so much outreach work since our meeting last week. The uproar from all of you about how we continue to go further away from fighting for renters and protection for them was really made like loud and clear, and I feel that's why I'm seeing this amendment in front of me. So I want to say thank you. I will be supporting the amendment today. I do want to say that I still feel that we are not doing the best that we can, that we as a council can, to fight for renters and make sure that we are hearing them, that we are advocating for them and stopping displacement that continues to happen every single day in our community.
Thank you. Ms. Jalali and then Ms. Naker.
Thank you. I voted against the vacancy decontrol amendment last week because it is, contrary to what Councilmember Prince said, actually exactly that. It creates a perverse incentive where a landlord who wants to get somebody out can come up with ways to either drive them out informally or non-renew them, or they will just be a bad landlord to the point that the tenant leaves, or they'll find some other way to get them out so that they can reset the rent. I think this is a bad precedent to set for our city. The amendment that's being brought today builds on that in terms of curbing what it will actually do. The policy that was passed last week, which I voted against, had no limit on what a landlord could reset the rent to after the unit is empty. This would make it so that the limit is 8%. I find this to be an important improvement on something I think is troubling as a policy concept. I think that what was negotiated within the task force was actually a very reasonable solution, which was to have preferential banking, which is a way that you can defer rent increases so that you don't have to automatically increase or use that, and then you can also find ways to increase the rent after you've stored those rent increases up. And I had brought amendments to try to improve that, which didn't pass. So I feel disappointed on the path that this has gone down. I will support this amendment today because it makes something better that I think was bad. I still think that this is a policy direction that will create issues in our city. So I think it's worth saying that when stating I am going to vote yes, because I think it makes something that was passed last week that would be pretty significantly inequitable in our city slightly less bad.
Thank you. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. I also left last week's meeting feeling very uncomfortable with where we landed, having voted against the full decontrol. And I really appreciate my colleagues hearing those concerns, and I think this provides much stronger protection for tenants. And even though I really liked the banking and the way that I thought was a very elegant way of making sure that rents wouldn't increase 3% every year, I do think this is ultimately a good compromise. It's also simpler to administer and to understand for tenants and for landlords. And if tenants don't understand the ordinance, then there's going to be no way that this is actually going to protect them and their rights. So I'm going to be supporting this as well today.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Mr. Tolbert.
Yeah, thank you. It sounds like most people at this table, or all people at this table, are going to support this amendment, and I encourage support of it. I do think what we've been trying to do, and I think is ensuring that in a city like the city of St. Paul that has many aged properties, that we have the ability to reinvest in properties so that we continue to keep quality housing across the city. I think that's important for not just renters now, but for the future of the city of St. Paul. And I think for the full vacancy decontrol, that is one of the reasons that you want that at the natural turnover time, is when most property owners reinvest in the property, and we want to continue to encourage that, and we want property owners to do that for future renters, and that the hope is that this amendment helps improve that and threads the needle, and my hope is that we vote for this today and carry this over for public hearing next week and approve the full package next week. So I encourage folks to do that. Thank you.
And I want to underscore we are concerned about what we are incentivizing or not incentivizing, and we don't know. I mean, we need to watch the way things shake out. But this, I know that there's many people on this council who have advocated for just cause ends of tenancy, and this is introducing just cause. And I think that that's an important, we did not stand in our tenant protection ordinance, and so this is a way to introduce it that's connected to the rent stabilization. So I am interested in seeing how that plays out, and it is a very unique and, again, in front of the curve part of this work. So it is only applicable for natural end of tenancy or just cause end of tenancy. So looks like the votes are there to pass this today, but we will, as I mentioned last week, continue to monitor this, and we will change it and make adjustments as appropriate. This is not cast in stone. It is, it's a great experiment, and it's something that we're doing to improve the lives of our community and to increase housing units, which we desperately need. So our work here is not done. We're going to continue to work on this going forward as well. Other thoughts on this before we vote on this amendment? Okay. I believe that I will just, Mr. Tolbert makes the motion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The amendment is approved.
And just a reminder, now this item lays over till next week. We will notice a public hearing for next week.
You should reopen the public hearing with a vote.
For next week, yeah. So but we'll notice it for next week as well and reopen the public hearing. Yep. Then? No. All right, so I'm getting advice from Ms. Moore that we should vote to reopen the public hearing next week since we voted on this amendment. So I'll make that motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is reopened and laid over or continued for next week on September 21st.
And that's procedurally required. If we make a change, we need to have a public hearing and we need to lay it over the matter for 1 week. Again, it is the intention, I think, for all of us to pass this next week. please, it's time. There's been a lot of folks engaged in this for a long time, and I know things are heating up in Minneapolis. So that is the intention of this council, to move that next week and then to advance other priorities, as Mr. Lally and I mentioned at the beginning of this item. Thank you, and thanks for your support.
Item 14 is Resolution Public Hearing 22-259, ratifying the assessments for replacement of lead water service line on private property during April to June 2022.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Mr. Tolbert moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 15 is Resolution Public Hearing 22-260, ratifying the assessments for repair of sanitary sewer line on private property during April to June 2022.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 16 is Resolution Public Hearing 22-265, approving the petition of Kerr Bang to vacate the public alley which runs through the property at 1503 Case Avenue.
And Ms. Yang, were you looking for a staff report on this item? All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Yang moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 17 is Resolution Public Hearing 22-267, approving the application of Twin Cities in Motion for 11 sound variances in order to present amplified sound for announcements, speakers, and music on October 1st and 2nd during the Medtronic Twin Cities Marathon at the State Capitol Complex, and on Sunday, October 2nd, for 10 other locations from Mississippi River Boulevard and Marshall East along Summit Avenue to Selby Avenue and State Capitol.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Come on up. As you walk up, I'll just mention, if you could, are you here to as a neighbor or as an event planner? All right, well, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Virginia Brophy-Ackerman, Executive Director of Twin Cities in Motion, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you to the city for hosting the marathon each year. It's our 40th anniversary, and we're so excited to be back at full capacity with all the cheering. And I want to acknowledge that I saw the submissions in the agenda, and we will reach out to those 3 individuals to address their concerns.
Great. That's wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for this investment in our city. It has to be the most beautiful marathon in the country. I mean,
Biased, but yes.
I mean,
We really
I'll admit it.
We
But
are.
I love a lot of other cities, but I just think I was going to unfairly ask you if like the Minneapolis side or the St. Paul side is more beautiful. I won't.
That's like us and your favorite
Yeah,
kid.
but then I thought, it's just all gorgeous. What an amazing place we live in. So thank you. We're excited to see the runners come down the Summit Avenue and up to the Capitol. It should be a lot of fun.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else here to testify? And with the promise of follow-up for the few folks that reached out on this item. All right, seeing none, Mr. Ballinger moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 18 is Resolution Public Hearing 22-269, approving the application of Allianz Field for a sound level variance in order to present live amplified sound for the smokeout at Allianz Field on October 2nd, 2022, on Spruce Tree Drive by Allianz Field.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Mr. Ballinger moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails. 7
in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 19 is Resolution Public Hearing 22-270, approving the application of Robert Cooley for a sound level variance in order to present amplified sound on October 2nd at 587 Summit Avenue.
Front lawn. I like that. All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, all the fun's happening in Mr. Ballinger's ward. Moves approval. Going to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 20 is Resolution Public Hearing 22-275, approving the establishment of a Farwell Yards Tax Increment Financing District in the Riverfront Redevelopment Project area and adopting a tax increment financing plan.
And on this item, we are looking for a staff report. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Jenny Wolf with PED, Council President and Council members. I will just give a brief staff report about this item. We received an application from Buell Investors to construct 2 projects on Farewell Yards, a 221-unit market rate project and a 63-unit affordable project. During the review of the initial application for the market rate project, Public Works had advised us that the vacated Bidwell Street should be reestablished through this development. So then we explored creating a redevelopment TIF district for this project so we could generate tax increments that would be able to fund the infrastructure, the new city road that will be a public right-of-way, and the affordable gap in the 63-unit project. So the TIF would be used for the affordable units and the new roadway. There would not be any tax increment that would be used for the market rate project. The TIF district, as proposed, would also generate tax increments for pooling for affordable housing that could be used anywhere citywide. So the action before you today is the required statutory public hearing, the first step at the City Council to consider the HRA's action at a future meeting to establish the TIF district. It's a redevelopment TIF district, so that's could be a maximum of 26 years. The total market value in the project is $62 million anticipated, and the total tax increments is about $24 million. And about 60% of that would be funding the housing gap in the affordable project on the site, and 16% would be for the roadway, 10% for admin, which is our maximum, and then 15% for pooling for affordable housing. The action here today just is the first step to establish the TIF district. It does not approve any tax increments going to Buell Investment at this time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. So this is the first step in this process, but those are lots of, you said million a lot of times.
Yeah, sorry.
And that's great. I mean, we've talked again and again today and every day about the need for these dollars to be invested, especially in housing. Are there any questions for Ms. Wolf? Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. No questions, but Ms. Wolf, just want to thank you for all of your hard work on this, and I will be supporting this motion after a public hearing. I'm very excited about the opportunity for more affordable housing on the West Side Flats. And also, I remember when I was part of the West Side Flats master planning process, we talked a lot about breaking up these huge super blocks that are on the flats and trying to restore the traditional neighborhood grid of streets that used to be there. And although for some reason, all of the development, not all the development, but much of it has happened west of Wabasha rather than east of Wabasha, where the plan actually focused. It is great to see this addition of public right-of-way and going back to some of that traditional network. It'll improve access all throughout that part of the neighborhood and make it more walkable. So I'm looking forward to supporting this. And I really want to hone in on your point that we are not actually allocating any TIF to this district today or to the development. I know there's still conversations going on with the neighborhood as we speak, but this is giving us the possibility to allocate those dollars in a future time.
And this might be a bit off topic, but is this potential project also made possible by the investment in the water capacity? Yep.
Very much so.
Okay. Ms. Prince, did you have a hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm going to be voting for this, but I did appreciate that we heard from a West Side resident and former Wesco Equitable Development team member who raised some concerns about the nature of the development. So I think it is good that we'll have the opportunity before we commit funds to look at some of the issues that were raised there. So thank you.
Great. Other comments? Okay, thank you very much. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 21 is Resolution Public Hearing 22-233, considering and adopting the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the Administrative Law Judge, and request for the Department of Safety and Inspections to upwardly depart to revocation of the cigarette tobacco license held by Bright Star Inc., doing business as Tom and Joe's Market, for the premises located at 684 Western Avenue. And this public hearing is continued from August 17th.
Great, and we have Ms. Scarda here from the City Attorney's Office with a staff report. Welcome.
Thank you, Council President Brenmo and members of Council. Teresa Scarda on behalf of the Department of Safety and Inspections. What we have before Council is a resolution considering and adopting the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of an administrative law judge, as well as the Department of Safety and Inspections recommendation for revocation, an upward departure to revocation for the cigarette tobacco licenses held by Bright Star Inc., which is Tom and Joe's Market at 684 Western Avenue. This license was the subject of a notice of violation and a request for upward departure by the department on March 22nd, 2022. The notice outlined the city's basis for the recommendation and upward departure.
Wow. How'd you do that?
I have no idea. The notice alleged that a complaint-based inspection on January 6th of 2022, during that inspection, the DSI inspector and an inspector from the Minnesota Department of Revenue observed and documented with a number of photographs multiple violations of flavored products. And they found them next to the cash register and the counter. They also noticed hidden flavored tobacco products in a bag under a chair, open box of Newport menthol cigarettes under the cash register, and unstamped cigarettes found in a black jacket. Due to the amount of flavored products found on the licensed premises and the blatant intentional nature of the violations, the department believed that substantial and compelling reasons did exist for upward departure from the presumptive penalty, which is 10-day suspension. So under our new matrix penalty, I just want to remind everyone that it goes 10-day and then revocation for the flavors. So the hearing, they had an ALJ hearing that was held on July 13th, and 15th before the ALJ Barbara Case. She returned her report on July 27th, and she issued her findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations. Those are attached to the council file. But basically, she found that there was a large amount of flavored products on site and that a basis existed for upward departure. She noted, these products weren't legal to sell, they were hidden, they were flavored products, and she said that the city had a substantial reason to upwardly depart to revocation because of the licensee's intentional conduct as evidenced by his concealment of the products, and that the licensee's conduct evidence is an intention to violate the terms of the license rather than inadvertent or unintentional selling. She also noted the substantial nature. And just for council's, I know it's attached, but I just kind of want to put the list of flavored products. Is that showing?
It's voice activated.
Okay.
In other words, you just say, I'm putting something.
I'm putting something up. and then I'm going to put a few pictures. I won't show a ton. I know, I just want to make sure that council understands kind of why the department is asking. So our list starts here.
Okay, and we're still hoping that the camera comes on.
Okay. I was just in Disney World. It's kind of magic.
Yeah.
You say, I'm putting this before.
Putting this
before for you all to see. Hopefully it'll show up on the projector.
Hopefully it's more exciting in Disney World.
We'll nudge them because I want to see it. But go ahead and you can do the.
So I'll kind
tell
of
us,
summarize.
Tell us the list, yeah.
I'll jump ahead
Okay.
and then we can go back and I can go over this. So the opposing counsel did submit a alternative statement of facts, conclusion of law, and proposed recommendations. So that is also attached for your consideration to the file, and I know you've looked at that. So we would start here with the list. We go through this page here. We go on to this page, and the items that were found in the top drawer, bottom drawer, underneath the plastic display, plastic chair, display, jacket, and box. And I'll just show you a few pictures, just so you'll understand kind of the department's request. Here's like the volume of products. Again, high volume. Items in the drawer. Items. The flavored menthol products. And a little bit more. So that gives you an idea of what the department saw and why they were recommending this upward departure. Any questions?
Well, I really appreciate the pictures as well. I think you painted a great picture with your report, but also just seeing those. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about the work that members of this council have done with flavored tobacco, with menthol, with couponing, and with reducing the number of overall tobacco licenses. And it's exactly for this. This particular shop is on my well-worn path to and from downtown, and I see tons of kids going into that shop. And so I really appreciate the work here and also the report, which I think is very illustrative of the problems and gives us a pretty clear idea of where we need to go. Are there questions for Ms. Garda? All right. No questions? All right. So let's, I believe that the attorney for Tom and Joe is on the phone. Okay, so I did it now. So why don't we turn things over to Ms. Tripp, and she can introduce the attorney. What's going on?
I think it's because they unmuted the chambers.
We think we're having the feedback because the chambers was unmuted on the Teams meeting. Not sure.
It's gone away now.
But yeah. All right, Ms. Tripp.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, try that again.
I did.
Thank you, Council President Mullen and Council. We do have.
I'm sorry, we're working on this. 1 second.
I wonder if this one should be muted.
My laptop's full. Oh, I'm still actually doing okay, but thank you.
Because I think that's the guy.
Yeah, but why can't you mute? Of course, the one time I have a backup cord available thanks to a friend. It's fine.
Okay.
All right. Ms. Tripp, try to talk again. Did we mute you? We're still working on this.
And just want to check in, make sure I'm not disconnected.
No, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll let you go ahead and start talking. We're having some technical difficulties, so
We're still here, Mr. Tuff. 1 moment, okay?
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't causing issues on my
you shouldn't
end.
hear us.
Oh, no, 1 moment.
You can go ahead. Ms. Tripp, can you hear us?
Yep, I can
Okay.
hear you. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you, Council President Brimmelin and Council. We do have one testifier, Mr. Derek Tuft with Tuft Law Firm. Mr. Tuft, can I have you press *6 to unmute yourself to begin your testimony, please?
Yes, ma'am, and I just want to confirm that everyone can hear me.
Yep, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. Good afternoon, council members, and thank you for your time. My name is Derek Tuft. I represent Bright Star Inc. that's doing business as Tom and Joe's Market. Today, our request is simple. We're asking that the council not depart upwards in granting the revocation, but instead apply the presumed penalty matrix for a first violation involving flavored products, which would be a 10-day suspension. Council members, we're not here attempting to avoid responsibility or dodge the consequences. What happened, happened. We are here asking that the council, in deciding how to handle this issue, apply the presumed penalty matrix. Bright Star Inc. is a small family-owned business that operates in St. Paul. It has 5 employees, including the 2 owners. All of these people derive their income solely from this store. To put them out of business ends their American dream and leaves all of these people without jobs and without work. I want to focus just briefly on what Bright Star has done since these violations to ensure that they're operating in compliance and that there will not be any future violations. Number one, my law firm's been hired to prepare policies and procedures, which we've done for them. We've had 3 separate meetings with all of their staff where we've walked through the council ordinances, exactly what's expected of them doing business in St. Paul to make sure that they're operating in abidance by those rules. Second, we went through a list of the employees who was there. Anybody that was involved with this incident has been let go, and any of the employees that had any issues with compliance in the past were fired. They ended up hiring 3 new people to staff the counter. Finally, we went through all of the vendor contracts, looking particularly and specifically for items that are banned. And we went through it laser focused with a microscope. Anything that was in a gray area or that we weren't sure on, we made sure they're not going to have in that shop in the future. Council members, we can't reverse time to correct the mistakes that have already occurred. And my client is not attempting to avoid punishment or avoid responsibility for what happened. My client is simply asking that in applying the punishment, the council considers what was approved and what was stipulated in the ordinance, which states in the penalty matrix that the presumed punishment for a first-time violation of a flavored product is suspension. For those reasons, we're asking that the council go with the presumed penalty matrix, give the suspension, and in doing so, not enforce an upward departure of the revocation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else here to testify on this matter? All right, seeing none. Ms. Tripp.
Thank you, Council President Brimon and Council. There's no additional testifiers online.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will discuss this, but for now, Mr. Ballinger would move to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails. Mr. Ballinger.
I was have a question about.
Sure.
Now this is about revocating the license, not closing the store.
Correct.
And they've been penalized already once. Am I correct?
Ms. Garda.
Council President Brenmo and Council Member Ballinger, I don't have, I can look up the history, but this is within this penalty matrix period. This is their first violation. But give me a moment and I'll look to see if we've got the history in here.
And while you're looking that up, I think the other question, I wrote down the same thing, was the attorney claimed that we were closing down the business, but in fact, we're talking about revoking the tobacco license.
True.
Okay.
True. This will not prohibit sales of, the only thing this will prohibit is sale of tobacco within the license, within the premises. This was actually one of my predecessor's cases, so. I do not see the history, but I will say I cannot tell you if there were other prior violations.
We do have, that the judge indicated that the licensee has had only one other adverse action, so there was previous adverse action.
Thank you.
Only one.
Only one.
Well, I think I'd like to motion to lay over for a week.
All right, so there's a motion from Mr. Ballinger to lay over for the week. And I appreciate that sometimes when these are complex and this is an upward departure, it's good to get a little extra time. I will just say one of the things that really stuck out to me was that this store knew it was doing something wrong. You can tell because it was hiding things in a drawer and hiding things in a bag under a chair and hiding things in pockets, and as opposed to, oops, we just didn't know about this. So I think that raises some concern, additional concern for me as we think about this for the upcoming week. Are there other thoughts on the motion for a 1 week layover? Mr. Tolbert?
Just had a question. The attorney's testimony, he said that they fired a bunch of employees. Is their claim that it was rogue employees and they were not aware? Or are they trying to blame the employees for something that obviously the company should have been aware of, even if they may not have been?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Tolbert, the ALJ's, because I did not handle the ALJ hearing, I can only tell you what the ALJ's report says. And in that report, the licensee argued that his license should not be revoked because the store supports himself, his families, and members of his extended family. He also argued that there was no evidence that the products were being sold, as the inspector did not purchase any products and observed no sales being made. He further argued that the ordinances regarding what products may be sold are confusing and change frequently. He also disputes that the flavored tobacco was hidden, but rather stated that the licensee was in the process of returning products to the vendor. He also said that the licensee stored flavored products under the couch cushion because it was necessary to use every possible space for storage in the small store. The ALJ found that the testimony whether the flavored tobacco products were being sold in the store was not credible. It is contrary to reason to believe that flavored products were hidden in the couch and the jacket because they were being returned to the vendor. Furthermore, the complaint that led to the investigation alleged that products were being sold out of the jacket and the products were still there sometime after the complaint was received. Licensee had ample time, these are the judge's findings, licensee had ample time to have returned the products if that had been his intention. If they were being returned, they would most likely have been packaged up and held in the licensee's storage room. It is reasonable to conclude that these flavored tobacco items were concealed because the licensee was selling them in violation of the terms of his license. Councilmember Tolbert, does that address your question?
Yeah, and I think from the testimony, I believe I heard the attorneys say that they've fixed the problem by firing employees. Maybe I misheard that, but
I heard that too.
it seems that all of this is difficult to believe. I'll just say that.
All right, so there's a motion for a 1 week.
But yeah.
There's a motion for a 1 week layover. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is laid over to September 21st. Legislative hearing consent agenda items 22 through 49 are before you for your consideration.
Good afternoon, Ms. Mormont.
Good afternoon, Council President Brenmo and council members. I would ask that to read items 28, 38, and 39 into the record today.
Item 28, RLH CO 22-8, appeal of Brett Cummings, Panama Flats Row House Association to a correction order at 228 Exchange Street South.
Ms. Mormont.
Council President Brenmo and council members, what this is an appeal of is a correction order to repair a retaining wall. There are photos in the record which let me begin, actually, before we go to the photos in the record, of centering you on where the property is. 228 Exchange is at the corner of Chestnut and Exchange Street. And if we could have the overhead camera, that would be great. And so here is this property. It is a row house and condos. To give you another image of it, this is the Google Street View. So you can see, and if it can be magnified, I think it would be useful to note that here and here we can see, even when the Google photo was taken, that there are repairs in the sidewalk, asphalt repairs to the cement, and this Google Street photo was taken in 2019. So this is a sidewalk that has experienced some problems. What we are dealing with at present, though, is the retaining wall. What you could tell from this picture, and I'm going to ask to go back on camera again, is that there are areas that are lower in this row house. You can see that there's like a garden level kind of opening. There's a staircase and a garden level lower that can be entered into. That garden level is like 1 story beneath the sidewalk, and it has a wall that goes up to underneath the sidewalk, and they fit together. What has happened with this property is that the wall is beginning to fail. We have some, not the best pictures in the world, but we have photographs of some of what's happening. And I will log into this and hopefully again. Every time I do that, OTC clears my workout. So if the overhead camera can magnify, please. This is some efflorescence, some opening. This is an opening between the private sidewalk and the city sidewalk, which you can see is tinted stamped concrete. You can see that there is sidewalk failure where the sidewalk right next to the private curb is beginning to come down. So we have wall, sidewalk separating, and sidewalk tilting a little bit towards the wall. That tilt causes water to infiltrate into the wall and make it worse. The order says the wall needs to be fixed. The appeal comes in and said, yes, the wall needs to be fixed. How does this fit together with fixing the sidewalk? And also, we don't think we should be responsible for paying for all of the wall repair, that the city should own some responsibility too, and there's some arguments made around that. So in order to get to the bottom of this, I had Public Works, the head of their sidewalk division, the right-of-way division, and the city's bridge engineer, the 3 of them, go take a look at this situation. It is their conclusion that this is, the engineer says, it's a chicken and an egg. The wall being in a state of failure could be causing the sidewalk to tilt, or the sidewalks tilting inward could be causing the wall to fail. We have both things happening. They cannot, in good conscience, come to an attribution for the problem. So where do we go from here? We know we have a sidewalk that needs to be fixed. We know we have a wall supporting a sidewalk that needs to be fixed. The sidewalk is public property. The wall is private property. The order is fix the private property. Public Works made the commitment first. Immediately, they will go and do temporary repairs to prevent further water infiltration into the wall. They have done those temporary asphalt repairs, put in a temporary curb, eliminated the trip hazard, in the sidewalk. The intent is that those repairs will hold for a year. The next repair that will need to happen is that wall itself will need to be fixed. The engineer believes that the wall repair will require engineering analysis. It will require ripping up a part of the sidewalk, and it will require then replacement of the sidewalk that got ripped up. Lastly, there will be the need for the permanent repair and replacement of that sidewalk section. What we agreed to in the legislative hearing, or at least I think that's where we left things, is saying, private property owner, you have until August 1st of 2023 to execute repairs on that retaining wall. We've got the temporary fix in place. Please repair this by August 1st of 2023. And Public Works, Beth Farraher committed, they will put on their work calendar to replace the sidewalk after that work is done. All that you have in front of you right now is that correction order. The date that I'm recommending to you is informed by some of the complicating factors involved in executing a repair of this nature. What you do not have in front of you is any mechanism to make a decision about who is financially responsible, any sort of engineering reports about what's going on and culpability, and any sort of a plan for how the sidewalk would be permanently replaced following repair next summer. This is, should it be corrected on this deadline? So it's really kind of square one, and what for the neighbor will be, the property owner in the neighborhood, that'll be a several step process. But for us right now, we're just here square one, affirming that this is a problem on private property that needs to be repaired, trying to coordinate with the city to make sure that the repairs make sense in the context of how Public Works can schedule it out, and that it's sufficient time to do it. And I think August 1st is sufficient time. I don't think there's time this year at all to do it. We need to deal with next year's construction cycle. So that's my recommendation.
Are there questions from Ms. Mormon? Ms. Danger.
Thanks, Council President. Ms. Mormon, thanks for the clear explanation of what was obviously a very complex situation. You mentioned that we don't have the facts in front of us and won't be able to get them tonight to make a determination on responsibility for financing the wall and solving the chicken or the egg problem of sidewalk and wall. But can you speak to what the process would be to figure that out? Because I'm sure that is of great interest to my constituents, and that's something that's of interest to me.
What I indicated in the hearing was that the first conversation needs to be had with Public Works, and what Public Works' assessment of it is, and what they believe their public responsibility is in this case. If the private property owner does not find satisfaction in the determination that Public Works comes up with, I explicitly said that litigation is the next step for this kind of problem to be resolved about responsibility for paying for this kind of a repair. So it isn't something that would come to the city council. It is, who's responsible in which part. It's filing a claim against the city and saying, you are. So that would go around. In terms of the type of sidewalk to be used for replacement, I think that's a Public Works policy, which would be influenced by the council.
And just so I understand how these processes work together, if we issue the correction order today and a claim is filed against the city and it takes a while for that claim to be processed, I don't know what that time frame is like. Do our systems talk to each other such that if that process is still happening on August 1st, 2023, that we are holding off to allow that to be resolved on our deadline?
My recommendation is to not condition the August 1st, 2023 deadline, but rather let the financial matters resolve themselves in the fullness of time, that there is someone will need to pay for this up front, and if that is something that needs to be discussed about who, that should be a conversation that maybe begins right away once the estimates are made, maybe begins later, but that the public safety component of making sure that that wall and sidewalk continue to function as they should is the first concern that the council has in front of it right now. And the money would be the second piece to be resolved in later.
And that, just last question, thank you. And that deadline is of August 1st is, I know, a lengthy one and more generous than we sometimes see here, but I understand informed by the amount of time that the temporary repairs Public Works did will serve to ensure the safety of the sidewalk and the wall. That's why that's the deadline.
Yes, yes. Requiring engineering, working with cement, doing a retaining wall, opening up the sidewalk, all of these things are involved, and we want to be conscious that it is going to take a little bit of time to get through this process. And at the same time, August 1st gives adequate time for Public Works to be able to also meet its commitment of replacing the sidewalk during 2023 as well. So they're still able to pour their concrete on schedule next year.
Great. So I appreciate, too, the separation of these two issues, which are very deeply intertwined, but I understand what we have in front of us today and what our public hearing should be focused on. So are there questions from Ms. Mormond? Okay. All right. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Kind of figured. If you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself, and I know that we've kind of set out some clear parameters, and it's very complicated. Hopefully, you concur that this explanation is thorough, and we're looking forward to hearing your testimony.
Yeah, my name is Brett Cummings. I'm a resident of the Panama Flats Row House Association. I'm also the Homeowners Association president. I want to note that we have about 25% of our residents actually in the room here today as well, as they're quite interested in how this is going to unfold. I appreciate the summary that Ms. Mormon gave. I wasn't expecting quite that much, so I was kind of prepared to give some of that story myself. But the one piece of that one piece I want to add to it is that the sidewalks in front of that building, I've been in the building for 4 years, and the prior association boards have spent the last 7 or 8 years petitioning with Public Works to get those sidewalks replaced because they've been failing. The asphalt patches that you saw in the pictures were there when I moved in. We weren't able to ascertain the exact date they were put in, but I can tell you it was more than 4 years ago. And as we've heard, that type of a patch is meant to be temporary. And so we have been trying hard to get those sidewalks replaced because we've expressed there's a trip hazard, a safety hazard, but more concerning to us in some ways was the way they were tilting towards the building. It was funneling rainwater, surface water into the building. And as we can all imagine, trapping water behind a concrete wall during freeze-thaw cycles is just a recipe to have that wall fail. So I guess when we got through the legislative hearing and the kind of consensus came back from the city engineers that this was kind of chicken and the egg, we can't decide which caused which, I was expecting something more of an equitable solution, being that we've been trying for several years to get this taken care of with no real response. In fact, my understanding in talking with the representatives at the inspections department, the reason this came to a correction order is because in the last couple of years we've been still pushing Public Works hard to get this work done, and they finally sent somebody out to look at it, and it resulted in, instead of fixing the sidewalks, we got a correction order. And there were a couple of other incidents that I outlined in my appeal. There was a water main break right next to the sidewalk in the city street that flooded the streets, and they had to dig a big hole. And the utility contractor noted that it's been leaking for years is what they found, and that just so happens to be right where the settlement begins on the sidewalk, and then it continues downhill towards Chestnut. So from our position, we believe that, we take pride in being stewards of a 140-year-old building in St. Paul, and we love living there. We believe that we've done everything we possibly could over the last handful of years to stop this problem from becoming a problem. Had the sidewalks been corrected many years ago, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion today because the wall would have been maintained in the way that it was supposed to. And so we're looking for a more equitable solution. Now, I understand the framework that you laid out. That may or may not be a discussion for this particular conversation. But with the result that came out of the legislative hearing, we were basically told, you replace the sidewalk, you replace the retaining wall, and all of it is at your association's cost. And that just didn't seem right to me. And if the only alternative is to litigate and file a claim against the city, I felt I really had to take the opportunity to stand in front of you and request your assistance in a little more equitable solution.
All right, thank you very much. Are there questions? Is there anyone else here of the 25% that wants to testify, or are you the spokesperson? Okay.
They're just for support.
Great, all right. And you heard quite a bit tonight, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's your last. Ms. Naker would move to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. Mr. Cummings, I want to thank you so much for being here. As Council President mentioned, thank you for sticking it out with us tonight. And thank you to the other residents who are here as well. I completely hear your frustration, and I'm sorry that this has been such a prolonged process for you. As Ms. Moorman mentioned, we have just one very clear-cut and limited item in front of us here, which is, does the wall need to be fixed? And I think it's clear to me that it does. We just don't have the capacity at this body to litigate or dig through the complexity that I'm sure is going to need to be required, to your point. The history, the construction, the projects, the breaks that have occurred over time to figure out how the equitable solution should be devised. So it's not a disagreement with you or not sympathizing with the situation. I'm really sorry that we're in this place, but I do think we are not in a position to make that judgment. So the right next step is the claim that Ms. Moorman suggested. So I'm going to move the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer, and I am grateful that we do have a full year to make these changes and get this straightened out as to responsibility.
And I will support your motion and just add to it that even though, I agree, the amount of time spent to try to resolve this is very frustrating. Sometimes this action of determining that there's a correction that must be fixed is the catalyst that we need to get things rolling the proper way. So I know Ms. Naker to be tenacious and will be a good advocate to help get through this process. This morning, this council talked about deferred maintenance across the city, and what you're seeing in front of your building is similar to what is across the city with sidewalks, and we're very committed to righting the wrongs of the past and making sure that those maintenance maintenance tasks are taken care of. So I support that, and also just second the apologies for how frustrating this has been. Any other discussion? All right, there's a motion from Ms. Naker for the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 38 is RLH RR 22-39, second making finding on the appealed substantial abatement ordered for 575 Park Street in Council File RLH RR 21-71.
Ms. Marmot.
Council President Brenmo and council members, last week I indicated that if the certificate of code compliance was received by today, I would not be asking the council to forfeit half of the existing $5,000 performance deposit. The code compliance certificate has not been received by today. However, I did meet with the owner who we have finally communicated on this. I have seen evidence of financing to complete the work, and I would ask the council lay this matter over for 2 weeks rather than amend and lay it over. Simply lay it over for 2 weeks for him to be able to complete and get the certificate of code compliance for this property.
Great. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Mr. Ballinger wants to close the public hearing and approve the recommendation for a 2-week layover. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is continued to September 28th. Item 39, RLH RR 22-40, second making finding on the appealed substantial abatement ordered for 595 Park Street in Council File RLH RR 21-72.
Ms. Marmot.
As indicated in the previous case, the owner did come today with evidence of financing to be able to finish the rehabilitation on this project. That is the last requirement to make the work plan viable. Therefore, I am recommending that the council grant 180 days to complete the abatement of the nuisance condition at this property. The amendment is in front of you in a new version.
All right, so that we would still hold a public hearing and close it and give,
Amend and adopt, yes.
adopt and amend. Okay, so this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this matter? All right, seeing none, I forgot what we're doing. Seeing none, we're moving to adopt and amend this item as recommended by the legislative hearing officer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted as amended.
All right, let's see. That brings us to the end of our legislative hearing consent agenda. We have items 22 through 49 before us for consideration. If you are here on items 22 through 49, this is your public hearing. I see none. Ms. Yang moves to close the public hearings and approve as amended. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the consent agenda is adopted as amended.
Okay, we are at we've reached the A word at the end of our agenda. Does anyone have news from the wards or anything they'd like to share before we adjourn today? Ms. Yang.
Thank you. Everyone is invited to watch a free movie. It's hosted by the White Bear Avenue Business Association and the Greater East Side District Council. They are showing Encanto over at the Hayden Heights Rec Center this Friday. And there will be games, drawings, and displays from 5 to 7 p.m. The movie begins at 7:15. And depending on weather, if it's rainy, then everything will be moved indoors.
No rain. Ms. Jalali.
Thanks. There's an annual event every year in the Marion Park, Union Park neighborhood. This is happening with Union Park District Council this Saturday. It's the 9th annual ice cream, peanut butter, and jam. I always think that sounds like a combination of too many sweet things, but what it stands for is that there's free ice cream, you can donate food, peanut butter, and then there's music. That's the jam. So I always just have confusion over what they call it because I just picture all those foods on top of each other and I don't want to eat it. So if that's a problem you have, I just saved you from it. It's not that. This is a free community social. It's happening from 12 to 4 at the Marion Park Rec Center on Saturday. And I always appreciate Union Park District Council helping to organize this really fun time. So it's free for the whole family. Come on through. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Ballinger.
Tomorrow night, Model Cities will be having their 55th anniversary celebration, and it will be from 6 to 8 at the Como Pavilion Waterfall Room, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. When I was in college, I would go over and see Dr. Timothy Van, who ran the Model Cities Health Clinic, and she'd give me a summer job each year. So I'm very grateful to the organization, and I'm planning to be there and have a good time.
It's a great place to celebrate, too. Ms. Dinker, did you have a hand up?
Yep. This Friday from 5 to 7 p.m., come on over to the west side to El Burrito Mercado for Fiesta Fridays. This one is a very special one because it is also El Burrito Mercado Day in the city of St. Paul, based on a proclamation at least from 2002 that I think we're hoping will be updated to 2022 because it is now the 20th anniversary of El Burrito Mercado. So come celebrate with us 5 to 7 p.m. on Friday.
Mr. Tolbert.
Yes, also this Friday is the start of Twin Cities Startup Week, and the start is centered at Osborne. Osborne will be hosting the kickoff in downtown St. Paul. Twin Cities Startup Week is a great event that brings together a ton of members in the tech community and others, and it's something that St. Paul, after Full Stack started, really got involved in. There's events next week at the Science Museum as well, but go check it out. It's really fun, and if you see a lot of fun entrepreneurs and techie people around, it's part of the Startup Week. But it's really fun to go to some of the events. So check it out. There's too many for me to list here.
Going back full circle to the top of our meeting, this weekend is the citywide big bulky drop-off event. This event on September 17th is at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds, which, by the way, is not in St. Paul, but they're kind enough to host. You can bring your items there. We take things like electronics, appliances, mattresses, tires, bikes, paper for shredding. There's folks there that are pulling things that can be resold or reused, and taking care responsibly of items that cannot. There is I think a very small fee for items like a mattress is $5, so it's rather affordable compared to if you were paying for it outside of your bulky item pickup. But that is, again, at the State Fairgrounds this weekend. And if you Google citywide drop-off St. Paul, you can get all of the information. It came up in all sorts of different places. So it's a big deal. Lots of folks turn out for that, and it's a good opportunity to clean up your stuff before the snow flies. So, all right, that seems like we've been around the horn, and it's been quite a day. So, seeing nothing else to come before us, we're adjourned.